We're learning the second Sikha of Vayeira in Chelek Tezvav on page 118. This shir is being learned Lila Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rab Menashe Koltman. Es steht in Zohar. It says in the Zohar as follows: Tlosa inun de kaime b'sa'adusa la'asoda. I'm going to read the lashon of the Zohar, and then in the parentheses the Rebbe translates it in Yiddish, so I'll translate it there. V'ilein inun be'er de Yitzchak Geirel va'avne de Shavi Yeshua v'chulu. Drei sind die, was stehen als Edus zum Meid sein. There are three entities that are standing as witnesses to testify. Und das sind, and they are as follows: der Ber von Yitzchak, the well of Yitzchak, der Geirel und Even von Yeshua v'chulu, the Geirel and the stones that Yeshua placed when he entered Eretz Yisrael. And then the Zohar continues and says, Be'er de Yitzchak minalan. From where do we see that the well of Yitzchak gives testimony? Tichsiv, Parsha Seinu, it says in this week's Parsha, Ba'avor tia lilei de v'gaimer, that this well that was dug is going to serve as a witness, as to say testimony. So in this Sikha, the Rebbe will not focus so much on the other two, which is the Geirel and Avne de Shavi Yeshua, and in fact the Rebbe is not going to focus on the whole union of testimony at all, but we're going to talk about this well over here. Is nit verstandig. The question here is der pasuk bavor tia lileida. The pasuk that the Zohar is quoting in this week's parsha, that this should be for me as a witness. Red doch wegen dem Ber was Avram hat gegraben. It's talking about the well that Avram dug. Is wie ruft es on the Zohar Ber de Yitzchak. So how does the Zohar refer to this well as the well of Yitzchak? Der Ramaz bavarendit mir und sagt. The Ramaz, one of the Mefarshim on the Zohar, so he brings up this question and he explains, Zeh, which is Bavur Lilei de V'gaimer, this pasuk Avram Amrei. Avram is the one that said so. Ela habe'er shechafar Avraham hu be'er de Yitzchak. Although Avram is the one that dug it, but it's Yitzchak's be'er. It's Yitzchak's well, and Avram is digging Yitzchak's well. That's what it means. Okay, now, so what does this mean? Aber das gufa fadet beer. This obviously needs additional clarification. Wie kann man sagen, wegen dem Be'er, was Avram hat gegraben, als ist Be'er de Yitzchak? How can we say that the well is Yitzchak's well? Avram is digging Yitzchak's well. In what way? What relates this well to Yitzchak that we say that Avram is digging Yitzchak's well? So the Rebbe is going to come back to the answer to explain the Pshat and the Ramaz towards the end of the Sikha in Ois Zayin. But first the Rebbe brings another pshat. Der Tate in seine Ha'aras von Gilead von Zohar schreibt. The Rebbe's father, when on the notes that he wrote on the actual page of the Zohar, when he was exiled and he didn't have any Sfarim and not much Sfarim, he didn't have paper to write, so the famous thing that the Rebbe's father, they found later of what he had with him, and he wrote his notes on the actual Zohar. Wegen dem Minyan, so he schreibt wegen dem Minyan, he says as follows. Yiches ha-be'er le-Yitzchak. The Zohar relates this be'er that it's Yitzchak's be'er. Im shekasav zeh b'Avram. Although this pasuk is speaking about Avram. Mipnei shebe'er da Avram sasmo pelishtim achri moisa. Because the well that Avram dug, the pelishtim clogged it up after he passed away. V'Yitzchak chafrei mechadash. And Yitzchak redug the well of Avram. K'ma shekasav vayashav Yitzchak vayachper. Yitzchak returned and redug the well. And then Vayikra Shemus, Kashemus, Ashakaral Aviv, and he gave them names like his father. So in other words, because Yitzchak is the one that redug the wells that were clogged up after Avram dug them, so therefore the Zohar relates this well that is to Yitzchak. Take a look in what it says in Torah in the beginning of this week's Parsha, the Parsha of Teldis that is, and you'll see over there the pshat on this. So that's why the Zohar relates this to Yitzchak. Der Pirish von Taten is l'chayre l'heipech from Pirish Ramaz. Now if you pay attention, you'll see that the pshat of the Rebbe's father is not only different of the Ramaz's pshat, but it's actually the opposite. Loit in Pirish Ramaz, according to the pshat of the Ramaz, as der be'er shechafar Avram hu be'er de Yitzchak, that the well that Avram dug is the well of Yitzchak. This is Yitzchak's well that Avram is digging. Meintas as be'ikir is as Yitzchak's be'er. That whose well is this? The well is Yitzchak's. Und nar die Chafiris aber is given durch Avram. Avram is the one that digs up this well. but it's Yitzchak's well. That's the Ramaz's pshat. Leuten Pirish von Taten, however, according to Rebbe's father's pshat, kommt es verkehrt. The reverse is true. As Be'etzem is as Be'er Avram. That really, this is Avram's well. He dug it originally and it's his well. Yitzchak hat es noch einmal aufgegraben, but because it was clogged and then Yitzchak redigs this well, the far is the pasuk miyachas and ber to Yitzchak. So therefore the pasuk, and according to the Zohar, is saying that this belongs to Yitzchak, that it's Yitzchak's well. But in essence it's Avram's well. But Yitzchak sort of brought a kiyum to this be'er. It was clogged up and he redug it, so therefore we relate it to Yitzchak. So it's two opposite pshatim here in the Zohar. Es is aber moving u pashut, it's self-understood, as light dem teichen u pnimius eim van chafiris beiris, looking at the deeper content and the deeper idea of what digging wells here is about. Obviously, when the Avos are digging wells, this is not just some occupation of physically digging wells, but there's something much deeper behind this. Haben beide Perushim and Art Vazbara. Both interpretations of the Ramaz and the Rebbe's father have room to be explained. Al Piruchnius, what this means. Darfum verstehen, so what we need to understand is, in was besteht the Chelek HaPirushim? What really is the difference between these two approaches in understanding the Zohar? Und für was hat der Tate anstatt zum Masbe sein dem Pirush Ramaz, and why the Rebbe's father, instead of taking what the Ramaz already says about this and explaining what he means, was wird vielmal herabgebracht in Sifrei Chassidus. The Pirush of the Ramaz is a very reliable Pirush. It's quoted many times in Chassidus, and the Rebbe's father also quotes it often. The Rebbe brings in Order 9. In one place, the Rebbe's father writes regarding something he says, that he says something that he was mechaven to what the Ramaz says. So it's a very reliable source. So why doesn't the Rebbe's father quote the Ramaz that addressed the same question and explain what the Ramaz means? And instead, the Rebbe's father chooses to say his own pshat, a different pshat, and actually a pshat that's the opposite of what the Ramaz says. As the tam lezeh is merumiz in dem tzion was the tate gitzu b'soif pirusha. The reason for and the source for the Rebbe's father's pshat is seen in the tzion, in what the Rebbe's father sends you to. He tells you, go look. Go take a look at what it says in Torah Parshas Teildes. Look at the Lahalon, as we'll explain here. That's the source, and that's the reason why the Rebbe's father is saying a different pshat than the Ramaz. So let's see what it says in Torah there. In Torah dort is Mevuer. So there in Torah it says, as der Inyan und die Aveide von Avram is in Kava Chesed. Avram Avinu, his Aveide, his life was all focused on Chesed. And that category of Chesed, which is Hamshacha Momayla Lamata. Chesed brings down revelation from above to below. Similar to what we have in this world. Water represents Chesed. Chesed flows from above to below. Chesed is bringing down the revelation from above to below. That's Avram. Und in Yonei Bavidasu Shal Yitzchak is in Kava Gevura. Yitzchak is the opposite. Yitzchak is Gevura. What is Gevura? Hala Mulmata Lamayla. Elevating from below, going up above from below. Similar to fire. Fire represents Gevura in this world, and the fire goes up from below. Und the Fage findet man, so this distinction we find also between Avram and Yitzchak, we find clearly from what it says in the Pasuk, as by Avram steht, Avram Moyavi, Avram my beloved. In other words, his relation to the Eibishter, his relationship is expressed in the union of Oyavi, my beloved, which is connected to Chesed. Und by Yitzchak steht Upachad Yitzchak. By Yitzchak it says Pachad, the fear of Yitzchak. Weil Ave nimmt sich von Midas HaChesed. Love comes from Chesed. Und Pachad, Yire, is from Midas HaGvura. On the other hand, Yire, Pachad, that's related to Gvura. So therefore we see this distinction in the Pasuk itself. Und Leitem Chilik zwischen der Aveide von Avram und Avedes Yitzchak. So now that we see here the difference between Avram's Aveide and Yitzchak's Aveide is the Alter Rebbe and Vayeira dort in Torah. There the Alter Rebbe explains, dem Tam, the reason was the Be'eris. Weil Avram hat gegraben, sind verstoppt geworden durch die Pelishtim. Why? When Avram digs wells, the Pelishtim had the ability to clog them. Und dafke nachten wie Yitzchak hat die Be'eris aufgegraben von das Nai, and only specifically after Yitzchak redigs these well again, haben sie gehatakim. That's when these wells remained and they lasted. Weil Klippas Pelishtim can seine Menaged nor zu Kava, Chesed von Kedusha. The Klippa of Pelishtim could only oppose chesed of kedusha. Unitzakava gvura. It can't come and oppose and fight gvura. So Yitzchak, which is gvura, the Pelishtim can't reach him, can't affect him. So what's the reason for this? What's the explanation of this? Then bir von a minyan. So to explain this, the Hezbollah is as follows. Plishtim is von Loshem Mavia Mefulish. What does the klippa of Plishtim represent? The word Plishtim is the same as the word Mavia Mefulish, which means an alleyway that's open from both sides, open on both ends. In other words, the word Mefulish means open, free. Am Mavi offen von beide Seiten. Und das ist was Razal sagen. This is also clearly in the Gemara. It says, Plishtim leitzanim hoyu. Plishtim were people that mocked things and laughed of everything. Valitzanis kumd, what's the source of litzanis? When a person makes a mockery out of everything and laughs off everything. That comes mitzat psichas alev b'yaisa, when a person's heart is too open and too free, in the negative sense. Shupasuach ha'mefulish mikol tzad. When a person is open and free, uncontrolled and wild, that's the source of the concept of litzanis, when a person makes a mockery out of everything. That's the klippe of Plishtim. Und hayes, as der Inyan von Chafiris Abeiris von Avram, is the Aveide von Israchvos mit Tzadachesed de Kedusha. Avram Avinu, which represents chesed, kindness, generosity, and giving, and revelation, with the Mamayla Lamata, revelation from above to below, or the love, which is the openness, and so on. So Avram Avinu, when he digs wells, that is representing his Aveide, which is expansion, expanding the openness of chesed of Kedusha. The tnuah von Ave, Tainug, and Simcha Belakos, the love or the pleasure and the joy in godliness. And with a great intensity, more than the usual measure. That's when he's digging the wells, digging, in other words, expanding and bringing his further the love that there is in the chesed of Kedusha. This is something that the Pelishtim can clog up. Specifically, the Pelishtim can oppose this. When you have the expansion in holiness, git art far yenike from Plishtim. This allows Pelishtim, which have a similar nature of expansion and of openness, to nourish. And in other words, that what happens in this nature of Kedusha could lead to the same nature, but in the negative sense. In Pelishtim, when it's open and free and uncontrolled. When you have expansion and the opposite side, which is opposing to Kedusha. So because it's similar in nature, that's why it's possible for Pelishtim to nourish, that it should lead into this negative openness. But even this itself, now that Rebbe clarifies here, is not going to happen usually. Nor, even this itself, that the Chetzainim, the Klippe, can nourish and can take and can oppose this holiness of the Kedusha of Avram, is not shaykh based the middle von Avram is mei begilu nefesh adam. It's not going to happen while that middah, that ava for the Eibishter that Avram is expanding is there and is strong in the person. Das heißt, in der Zeit, wenn der Eure Leki is mehr begoloi und der Ave v'oine, in der Ave v'oine, when you have the revelation of godliness, that brings about the love and the pleasure for this connection to the Eibishter. At that time, it's impossible for Pelishtim, even though Pelishtim has a similar nature of expansion, it will not be able to take anything from this and turn it into negative. When this revelation and this pleasure and this love for the Eibishter is concealed, when that feeling is not there anymore. But what you still have over here is the nature of the love. The nature of the love, which is the openness and the expansion in the person's heart that he felt when he had that love for the Eibishter. So that feeling of expansiveness that it should lead into the negative openness and the wildness, hailulus, frivolous behavior, and simcha that comes in klippe, in the negative sense. Und das ist mudgish in Pasuk Vayisatnu Plishtim Achrei Mois Avram. When could Plishtim clog the bear of Avram? Only after Avram passes away. As dafke nochten wie es hat sich von ihm abgetan die Ave de Kedusha, which means only after this love of Kedusha that is by Avram revealed and intense, only after that is removed, when it's not there, which is what Mois Avram represents. when that Aveda and that Gilui of Avram is not here anymore, uns is beim geblieben nur die Tnue vom Psiches Alev. And now what you have is, from this love, that nature of expansiveness that came from the love for the Eibishter, not done is done art for the snagdas from Plishtim, vayisatmun Plishtim. Then the klippe of Plishtim could come in and nourish and take and turn it into a negative expansiveness, to take it into a freeness and openness that's negative. So this is all from Avram. By the Aveda of Avram, it's possible that the Hisrachvus of Kedusha should eventually lead into the Yisrachvus of Plishtim. But however, when it comes to those wells that Yitzchak dug, haben die Plishtim nicht verschotten. The Plishtim never poured any sand over it. They never clogged it. Yitzchak digging wells is expanding his Aveda. What is his Aveda? The fear and the dread of Hashem, the awe of Hashem. That's a completely different kind of Aveda. The Far haben die Plishtim verzennen der Lo'umazeh von Chesed the Kedusha. So the Plishtim that are only the opposition for Chesed of Kedusha, nicht gekannt Seisem sein, the Be'ere shal Yitzchak, wissen Yonim is Gevura the Kedusha. So Yitzchak, which represents Gevura, the Gevura and the awe for Hashem, that's a different Aveda, but the Plishtim have no place here. Weil ein bi Yechilas kol midashe b'lo'umazeh liyes menagid rak l'midah shekenegda b'kedusha. There is no ability of any midah in L'umazeh, in Klippah, to come and oppose and take from that nature in Kedusha. It's only if it's from the same nature. Then it's possible that it should lead into the negative. But if it's from a completely different nature, completely different type of Aveda, there's no place for this Klippah there. That's the difference between Avram and Yitzchak. We now understand on a deeper level what the digging of wells is all about. They're expanding their Aveda, each one, Avram in his nature of Chesed and Ave, and Yitzchak in his nature of Gvura and Yireh. Nicht nur haben die Plishtim nicht gekannt Seisem sein, the Be'ere shal Yitzchak, but now this goes a step further. Not only are the Plishtim not able to clog up the wells of Yitzchak, nor noch mehr. It goes even further. Euch the Be'eres von Avram, even those wells of Avram, hagam zeir inyan is Chesed, Avram's Aveda is expanding Chesed, haben sie nicht gekannt verstoppen, nachdem wie Yitzchak hat sie aufgegraben. After Yitzchak came and redug the wells of his father Avram, now the Plishtim cannot clog those wells. In other words, it's still Avram's wells, which means it's still Chesed. It's still an inyan of Chesed and Ave. And l'chayre here, the Plishtim can come and nourish from there. They can come. It could lead into the negative Chesed of Klippah, but not after Yitzchak redigs them. Why is that? But in that minyan, so to explain this, so here there's yet a deeper point. Till here, the Rebbe was talking about the nature of Chesed. Chesed is expansiveness, openness, and Yireh is the opposite. Yireh is the fear and dread of Hashem, and therefore there's no room for Chesed the clip over there. Now the Rebbe will focus on a deeper aspect of the difference between Ave and Yireh, or Chesed and Gvura, and in this sense, Yireh has a tremendous advantage over Chesed and Ave. Die Tchune von Midas Ave. What's at the core, what's the nature of love? Is verbunden mit Hergish HaMetzias. The person is expressing a feeling of himself, of what he feels, his connection that he has. That's what Ava means, that he loves. So the person's Metzias, the self of the person, the entity of the person, is in this, that he feels that he loves. Yesh Misha Oyev, the expression that's used by the Alter Rebbe in Torah and similar in Tanya, there's a yesh, there's a person that feels a love. Yireh, but by its very nature, when you talk about yireh, fear or awe for Hashem, Kabbalas Ol, and accepting the yoke of heaven, which is related to yireh, is p'chinas bittul. Here a person is annulling himself. When you stand in the presence of greatness and you feel a tremendous feeling of awe, so it's not about what I feel, it's not about yourself, on the contrary. It's overwhelming you, and you feel a feeling of awe and dread in the presence of such greatness. So it's bittul ametzias. It's annulling and negating your existence. So in this sense, over here the Rebbe is not only focusing on the nature of love itself as being openness, which is the opposite of the nature of fear, where a person is closed in himself, and so it's the opposite in that sense. Here the Rebbe is going a step deeper. Ave is about me, that I love. Yireh negates and annuls the person. On the Rebbe, so here's a tremendous advantage that Yira has. When the Avodah von Ayidin is nar mit Ava und Simcha allein, if a person serves Hashem just with love and joy, wie bald steht in Atnuah von Yeshes, since at the core of love you have this nature of self, I love. Hagama das is Yeshes to Kedusha. Of course we're talking about I love Hashem, so we're talking about a Yeshes in the most positive and holy sense. Can the fun kommen zu Pashut Yeshes? It is possible that this should lead into simple Yeshes where the person becomes self-centered or focused on himself, and it leads into being selfish in the negative sense. Right? And again, of course, this has to be said like the Rebbe said before, it can't come directly from the Yeshus of Kedusha into the Yeshus of Klippah. The Rebbe already explained before. Achrei Meis Avram, that it could happen after the Yeshus of Kedusha is not begoli, when that Ave to the Eibishter is not begoli. So then eventually this nature of self could come out and be used in the negative sense. Und von es Rachvus the Kedusha, and from this expansiveness of holiness, in welcher steht b'shas hatfila, in which a person has and feels when he's davening, when a person is davening properly and he feels the love for the Eibishter that comes out with his self that's expressed in his davening, then later on, when that inspiration of the davening is not revealed in him anymore, so then he can come out and that expansiveness and that self that he felt in davening could be used in the negative sense until it comes down to haylus, litzanis, the frivolous behavior and the openness and the mockery that comes out from this. Aber wenn der Avodah is euch mit Yira und Kabbalah. But if the Ava and the Simcha for the Eibishter also has along with it the Yira and Kabbalah, the awe and accepting the yoke of heaven, the Tnur from Bittul and Hepech HaYeshes, which is an opposite of love. It's not just a different nature, but it's really the opposite, annulling yourself and putting yourself aside completely. The lust nicht die Bittel als die Chitzenim soll haben a unique a fille von der Esrachvus und Ave v'simcha. So this, because you're complementing your serving the Eibishter with love and joy, with also having bittul and yira for the Eibishter, so this doesn't allow the klippah to come and have a unique even from your love and joy that you're serving the Eibishter with. Because you have this tnu of bittul, the mila that there is in the yira is so powerful that it's not just a mila for the yira itself. This brings that element of aveda in a person's life and everything that he's doing. That even his ava and his simcha has that nature also of bittul that he's complementing his aveda with this yira and kabbalah soil. So therefore now klippah can't get any nourishment, can't come and take anything negative from this person because he has that bittul that doesn't allow them in, even from the ava and the simcha as well. So this is a deeper point there of what the Yira accomplishes when you add the Yira to Simcha and Ava. When the Mitzvahs move on, so therefore from this we understand. Was the Be'eres, was Avram hat gegraben, haben die Plishtim Seisem gewinnt. When Avram Avinu digs the wells, the Plishtim are able to clog it, as we explained before already. Aber danach, when Yitzchak hat sie aufgegraben, when Yitzchak comes and redigs his father's wells, haben schon die Plishtim sei Merit Seisem gewinnt. So then, even Avram's wells, they can't clog anymore. Weil wenn in die Be'eres von Avram, Avedes ha'ava v'simche, is faran euch die Chafira von Yitzchakin. When these wells are redug by Yitzchak itself, which means the Tnuah from Bittul von Yira v'Kabbalah soil, when you add to the Ava and the Simcha also this nature of Yira and Kabbalah soil, which is this Bittul, is shaynet shayach as the Chitzanim sollen haben a unique von sei. So now it's not anymore possible that the Chitzanim should come and take any nourishment from the Aveda of Ava, and the Father is like nifsak oid neviyasam. So therefore the flow of the Aveda of Avram, of the well of Avram, does not get interrupted anymore. So looking at what the Rebbe is saying here, you can say this in 2 points or in 2 ways. Either the point is that the Yira and the Bittul complements the Ava and the Simcha. Or maybe it goes even a step deeper. Yitzchak is redigging the very same well of Avram, meaning that the nature of Ava, of Yira and Bittul, that is infused into the Ava and Simcha. It's sort of a different type of Ava and Simcha. The usual Ava and Simcha, by its core, has that Yeshes, Yesh Misha'ayev. It's me, it's I love. But when you complement the Yira and the Bittul to this, so then what happens is, it's a different type of Ava and Simcha. Now Yitzchak redug those wells. So it's an Ava and Simcha that has no element of Yeshes to it, no element of self to it. It's a pure love for the Eibishter. The love is focused on the one that I love. And the me that loves is not felt at all. And then the Unika of the Chitzainim can't happen. There's no Yeshus. The Unika comes from Yeshus, from selfishness. Here there could be no Unika. Leitem Bir Anal is move on. So according to this explanation, it's understood as the Be'eris was Avram hat gegraben, those wells that Avram dug. Hagam as die Plishtim haben sie verschotten, even though the Plishtim covered them with sand. Und Yitzchak hat sie euch gegraben von das Nei. And Yitzchak is the one that comes and redigs them from new. Von deswegen sind sie euch noch dem Be'ika Avram's Be'eris. But whose wells are they? This is Avram's wells. In other words, the Aveda von Ava v'Simcha. It remains Avram's place, Avram's expansion of his Ava and Simcha for the Eibishter. So why is Yitzchak redigging Avram's wells? On the Po'ole von Yitzchakim, which is Yireh v'Kabbalah soil, then Yitzchak, when he redigs them and adds his element of his Aveda to Avram, which is Yireh and Kabbalah soil, is Kedei zu verhiten dem Kim von dem Ava v'Simcha. That's in order to protect the Ava and Simcha, that there should be no possibility of any Unika of the Yeshus when Yitzchak adds the nature of Yireh and Kabbalah soil. And the Rebbe is the Tata Mefarish, and now we understand the Pshat and what the Rebbe's father says. That's why the Rebbe's father explains the Zoyar as the Kavanah from Zoyar in Imloshim Be'er de Yitzchak. That when the Zoyar says that Avram's Be'eris is the Be'er of Yitzchak, what does this mean? Is not as the Etzem Be'er is Yitzchak's. It's not Yitzchak's well. Wie like in Pirish HaRamaz, like the Ramaz says. Not as das is the Be'er de Avram. That really it is Avram's Be'er. Und es ist nur was Yichsel Yitzchak. The Torah and the Zohar says the Pasuk relates it to Yitzchak. Hayei says that Kiyum von Avram's Aveda is durch der Aveda von Yitzchak. Because in order for Avram Avinu's Aveda of Av and Simcha to last and not go out in Chas v'Shalom into a place of Klippe, you need Yitzchak to add his part of Aveda, his Yireh and Kabbalah soil, that it should last. But the Chiddush here is that Yitzchak is able to bring a Kiyum to Avram's Aveda. It's not just about moving away from Ava v'Simcha and saying, oh, Ava v'Simcha is not going to work. Love for Hashem, joy for Hashem, that's not going to work because could end up in Klippe. No, you could leave that there. That's good. But you have to add the Yireh and Kabbalah soil, so it's still Avram's well. That's the pshat that the Rebbe's father says. So now to come back to explain the Ramaz's approach, according to the way Chassidus explains this inyan. The inyan from Chfiris Be'eris B'chlalos, B'chlal generally, when we speak about digging wells, is the Aveda in Anoifen from Mulmata L'mayla. This is a kind of Aveda that's more expressing Yitzchak's Aveda, which is digging from below. Right? When you talk about digging wells, what's the idea of digging wells? That you want to discover the fresh waters that there is here below. Avram Avinu's Aveda is Mulmayla Lamata, to open up the revelation from above, to have a revelation of godliness that comes from above. And once you have that revelation, so then you respond with love and you connect because of such a great revelation. Yitzchak is to try to discover the positive and the fresh waters that exists below, here, the Tachten. Within the Metzius of the world below, you can find the waters over there. That's what his Aveda represents. So the concept of digging Beiris B'chlal is more related to Yitzchak than Avram. Was das kommt mit der Kava Gvura de Yitzchak, wie das is Mavur B'kam, as it's explained in many places, that's what Gvura is about. Gvura is the expansion from below. The Far is the Ramaz Mefarish, so therefore the Ramaz says, as der Be'er gehert Beketzu Yitzchak, Be'er de Yitzchak Kava Gvura. That the wells over here is related to Yitzchak. Yitzchak is the one that represents Gvura, and the Be'eris of Yitzchak, all the Be'eris, even the Be'er that Avram Avinu digs, but when Avram Avinu is digging Be'eris, he's digging Yitzchak's Be'eris. Avram Avinu is sort of doing an Aveda, which is really Yitzchak's Aveda. That's the way that Ramaz sees it. Nor, says in them euch gewend der Eiftu von Avram Kava Chesed. After all, it's Avram digging these wells. So the main inyan of digging wells is the Aveda from below, the Aveda of Yitzchak. And yet, which Yitzchak's Aveda also represents Yireh and Kabbalah soil. That's the main Aveda. Avram is digging them means that Avram also adds his element of his Aveda of Ava and Simcha to the main Aveda which is Yitzchak. That's the way the Ramaz sees it. The Yesh Lahisif, to add another point to explain what the Ramaz is saying. In Zohar dort redt sich doch nicht wegen dem Be'er Gufa. The Zohar is not discussing the wells themselves, nor wegen dem Be'er als Eidus. The Zohar is discussing the Be'er, and also over there it's the Geirel and the Avonim of Yeshua. It's discussing three things that serve as testimony. Und der Fahr ruft der Imam be'er de Yitzchak. That's an additional reason why it refers to it as the well of Yitzchak, even though Avram is the one that dug it. Wie bald, als die Sache von Eidos zu öftan, dem Kiyum von dem Minion, was seinen Meid. Since what's the concept of Eidos? An Eidos is to come and bring a Kiyum, to come and testify and to verify about something that they're testifying about. Das Eidos sagen von die Eidem is mevatel die Yerudim auf dem Sach. The whole idea of Eidos is to come and to take away any questions or opposition that there are about something, to come and clarify the fact. So that's what Eidos is. Und der Inyan, a Kiyum in Be'er, hat sich aufgetan durch Yitzchak in Kanal. So the Kiyum of the Be'er, even if it's true that Avram is digging it, but nevertheless the Kiyum of the Be'er, what solidifies and what verifies this Be'er is the Avodah of Yitzchak Dafke, as the Rebbe explained already before. So it's the same thing according to the Ramaz. According to the Ramaz, the Be'er is the Avodah of Yitzchak. So even if Avram is adding his ingredient, his element of the Avodah to this and digging them, but nevertheless, Avram's addition is sort of a temporary thing, that you add that in. But the main Avodah, the lasting Avodah here of Be'erais, is Yitzchak's Avodah. And therefore, according to the Ramaz, we name these Be'erais, Be'erais the Yitzchak, not just because Yitzchak redug Avram's wells, but because in essence, even when Avram is digging them, it's Yitzchak's wells. Der Inyan in Avodas Adam. So to bring this down and to explain this in Avodah, I mean the Rebbe till here was explaining in Avodah this Inyan, but the Rebbe now brings the sort of the conclusion over here, the difference between the Ramaz's approach and the Rebbe's father's approach in Avodah. The Avodah von a Yidin darf sein, Beyira Bittel. So one approach is that a Yid's Avodah has to be primarily with Yira, the awe of Hashem, and to be bottled, to annul yourself to Hashem. And that's the main occupation, that should be the main focus of a person's Avodah. Nor mitzad geidel mailas simcha. But since simcha, adding simcha into your Avodah Hashem has tremendous benefits, darfen dem sein euch der kava simcha. So the person should also introduce into his Avodah simcha. Simcha has its tremendous benefits, so you can't just stick to Yira and Bittul, you have to add Simcha as well. The Simcha darf aber sein behelem. However, in this approach, the Simcha has to be concealed. The main thing is, you're standing in the presence of the Eibishter, of the king, so that has to be the Yira and the Bittul, that's the main thing. But then you should also add Simcha for the benefits of Simcha. This is sort of more the conventional way of serving the Eibishter, and well, I don't know if the word conventional is right, but in other words, this would be the Ramaz's approach. The Be'er is Yitzchak's Be'er. The main Avodah is the Yira, the Bittul, Yitzchak. And then Avram is digging it, and we're adding also that ingredient of Ava and Simcha of Avram. Von dem, was is Mavur in Torah Eresh Parshas Toildes. But now, the Rebbe's father is telling us, take a look at what it says in Torah Parshas Toildes. Here you're going to see a Chiddush. Here you're going to see that no, there's an opposite approach. As Durech, der Chafire de Yitzchak le Nifsak Oid Niviyasam. That it's specifically when you have Yitzchak digging the wells, that's when the flow of the well does not get interrupted. Von der Beres was Avram hat Chayfe given. And what is Yitzchak digging? Yitzchak is redigging the wells of Avram. Yitzchak is causing that the flow shouldn't stop, but which flow? The flow of the bed of Avram. So from Torah you see is Mochach, as der Oiftu von Yitzchak, Kava Gvure is in them, that when Yitzchak is redigging the wells, what's the position of Yitzchak? Adding the element of Yitzchak's Avodah, which is Yira and Bittul, what is that doing? Was durch ihm is given der Kiyum from the Beiris da Avram. That the main focus is the Avodah of Avram, the flow of the waters of Avram. And Yitzchak is just coming to bring a Kiyum to that. The adding Yitzchak's Avodah is that Avodah should last. The Avodah von Ava v'Simcha, but the main focus should be the Avodah of love and joy for the Eibishter. So what this means is the exact opposite of what we said in the first paragraph here, in the approach of the Ramaz. As the Avodah is in Kava Ava v'Simcha, that the main Avodah, the primary Avodah of a Yid should be with love and with joy. K'mayim as it also says in the Zayah, less pulchane k'pulchane d'richim musa. There's no service like serving the Eibishter with love. Nor b'chdei sheyiskayim boya simcha, in order that this avodah of simcha should last, and there shouldn't be any nourishment that klip and sitracha should be able to take from this nature of expansiveness. You have to also bring first the yira and kabbalas malchus shemayim to keep it in place, that there shouldn't be, as the Rebbe said before, any element of yeshus, even yeshmisha oyev of kedusha, that could then eventually lead to something negative. So the conclusion over here is that the whole Maila of the Rebbe's father's Piddush in the Zoyar, and he chooses this pshat, and he did not even quote the Ramaz at all. He just brings his own pshat, is because the Rebbe's father is giving you a completely opposite derech and aveda. That your main aveda should actually be with Ava and Simcha. Elamai, this Ava and Simcha has to be complemented by the Yira and Kabbalah soil in order that there shouldn't be a unique to Lomazeh. But this is the main aveda though. It's the Beiris da Avram. But nevertheless, we also relate it to Yitzchak because Yitzchak brings a kiyum to the main aveda of Ava and Simcha.